Okay, if you're still with me, I'm super impressed. But hang on, because we're going to be getting into some deep weeds now. The previous videos laid out the important facts regarding the political activity of the Phillips family from 2020 to the present and how they might relate to the more toxic events in Orinoco. Those videos strive to deliver facts with as little personal opinion as possible. The next video and videos are going to be a little bit different, as it's going to be fairly difficult for me to separate those two any further. Personal opinion will be just that, it's opinion. I will resist as best as possible any judgments on personal character, but I will share my interpretation of events that I have personally witnessed, experienced, or studied in depth. So, how does what we have just reviewed in the past few videos relate to the original question that I posed in the very first video, which was, what could be the source of the significant toxicity that we have been noticing over just the past few years regarding our local city politics? Well, once you start pulling on this thread, it starts to unravel fairly quickly. As a recap, let's just quickly review. Wendy initially ran for the city council seat that was vacated in March of 2021. She was unsuccessful with that endeavor, but she was appointed to the Planning and Zoning Committee that summer. Months later, that same council seat was unexpectedly vacated again, and her husband, Jim, was successfully appointed to that seat in December of 2021. He was then also appointed to the Planning and Zoning Committee. Jim then ran unopposed for his appointed council seat and was elected to that in 2022. So things really seemed to significantly escalate locally in Orinoco in the spring of 2023 when some very influential seats on local committees were being appointed. By that time, Wendy had become the Planning and Zoning Chair. The first influential seat up for appointment was on the P&Z committee. Jim Phillips remained a member of this committee, as did Councilmember Jim Richards, who over the course of this time had seemingly grown fairly close with the Phillips family. There were two applicants for this seat, both of whom were acknowledged as being very acceptable applicants. The P&Z committee recommended to appoint Paul Pendergrass to the seat of the Planning and Zoning Committee, and this was passed by the City Council. Of note, this is Paul. The second influential seat that was up for appointment in the spring of 2023 was for the newly formed EDA board for the city of Orinoco. There were several applicants for these positions, many of whom were highly qualified and held very specific skill sets that made them excellent assets to that board. One of these applicants was a woman who had actual previous experience not only working on an EDA board, but actually helping to develop one. During the council meeting on March 2023, Mayor Eichhorst put forth his recommended candidates, and the council discussed. One of the applicants recommended by the mayor was a woman that I just previously mentioned with the EDA experience. This individual was the subject of much conversation between Jim Richards and Jim Phillips, as they expressed preference for a different candidate. The biggest concern stated by Jim Richards at the time regarding this candidate was that during her interview for the seat, she made what he claims was a discriminatory comment when she discussed wanting to seek potential opportunities for grants, such as ones that would support women-owned businesses in the city of Orinoco. A motion was made by the mayor to appoint the candidates to the EDA that the mayor had originally brought forth, which included the candidate with a previous EDA experience. This motion failed due to 3 votes of no, 2 of which included the votes by Jim Phillips and Jim Richards. The mayor then realized the only avenue for success would be to appease Jim Richards and Jim Phillips in their endeavor to seat a specific person on the EDA board. Therefore, the mayor then brought forth an alternative slate of candidates, replacing one of the candidates with the Jim's preferred candidate, Jan Thronson. This motion then succeeded, and Jan Thronson was seated on the EDA board for Orinoco. Jan Thronson is a vice chair of the Olmsted County GOP, and he can be seen in these pictures. This activity and behavior by the Planning and Zoning Committee and by the City Council members did not go unnoticed. In March of 2023, I spoke at the public forum to raise my concerns about what I was noticing at the time. I questioned how it was acceptable that one of the council members at the time, who had largely been absent for many of the council meetings, suddenly appeared during this meeting where influential seats were being appointed so he could cast his vote. My public comment prompted this council member to abruptly walk out of the meeting sometime later. Shortly after, a story regarding all of this hit the newspapers. So I again attended a public forum of the council meeting the following month in April. I shared my concern that what had happened regarding the newspaper story felt like direct retaliation for my speaking out about what I perceived to be inappropriate conduct on part of the city council. As I was explaining myself, city council members Jim Richards and Jim Phillips began shouting over me that I was out of order. They forced me to stop speaking and ultimately had a police officer remove me from the building altogether. The officer told me once we were outside that he was just specifically following the orders of Jim Phillips to have me removed from the building because he had misunderstood Jim Phillips to be the mayor of the city. This resulted in a federal lawsuit that the city had to settle in federal court due to this being a blatant violation of my First Amendment rights. Later that fall in 2023, the city council again made news headlines by abruptly firing the city administrator for unsubstantiated reasons. It would later be revealed by council member at the time, Carl Kraus, that secret meetings between specific members of the city council, including himself, but excluding the mayor, were being held. And it was at a meeting such as this that the decision and plan was made to fire the city administrator. During that specific meeting, the two members of the personnel committee, Jim Richards and Jim Phillips, publicly conducted their review of the employee with her consent. Carl then made a motion to fire the employee, and she was terminated on the spot. Careful watch of this event seems to show instances where Carl is prompted by other council members to make this motion. Now, this motion and vote to terminate the city administrator at that time directly led to the immediate resignation of another city council member at that same meeting. So at that meeting, the city lost the city administrator as well as a city council member. That city council member left a vacant seat that was then ultimately filled and appointed to Paul Pendergrast. Carl Kraus now reports several illegal closed-door meetings such as this had taken place, and that because of this, he ultimately made the decision to resign from city council. He has since shared his story of his involvement in these illegal meetings, both at public forums of the city council meetings, as well as through sending a written statement broadly via the mail to the citizens of Orinoco. In the meantime, this opened up his vacated seat to another appointment made by the sitting council members. So, this wraps up the local political drama of 2023. The next video will be the conclusion discussing events leading up to the present moment.